welcome to Cross Life Prophecy in the News.
Yay!
We're going to be looking at several major Bible prophecies along the timeline of the final 7 years that begins with the Mideast Peace Agreement and ends with the Battle of Armageddon and the Second Coming. We'll study things like the Mark of the Beast, the New World Order, the One World Religion. But first, I'm going to pass along a few words of wisdom. Wisdom nuggets. Well, actually this week there's only one wisdom nugget. Last week there were 3 wisdom nuggets. And I guess I wasn't feeling as wise this week as last week.
That's fun.
Here's the wisdom nugget for this week. God saves completely. That's a direct quote from that wise old sage, Rick Brinegar. And you can quote me on that. And there's a verse for it. Wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that come unto God by him, seeing he ever liveth to make intercession for them. Hebrews 7:25. That's the nugget and the verse to go with it. As far as the application is concerned, I'm leaving that up to everybody in the room. I want to hear from everybody. To answer this question, what does it mean that God saves to the uttermost?
Furthest reaches of the earth, no matter what sins you've committed.
Anybody else?
I agree.
Beyond anything that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Uttermost.
Any wrongs we've done? Yeah. We ask for forgiveness. He saves us.
But I thought there was one thing that he doesn't save us from is if we blaspheme the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That was the only thing that I know of that he won't forgive us of.
Let's take it a step further. What does God save us from besides eternal torment? What does God save us from besides eternal torment?
Separation from him.
Mm-hmm.
God saves us from sin and death, and also makes us partakers of Christ's holiness and his fruit, his inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
We're made fellow heirs.
Good. What else?
Saves us from ourselves.
That's one of the ones I came up with. I'll show you the list in a second. I want to give anybody else who wants to join in there to share with us what you think God does, what God saves us from besides eternal torment.
I
Anybody?
guess eternal torment would also mean hell, right?
Say again?
Eternal torment means hell, right? Same thing?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Eternal condemnation, however you want to put it. It's a topic we've only covered here once because it's so unpopular.
He saves us from.
No. Water.
Oh, he saves us from. Did somebody say ourselves?
Yes.
Oh,
Well, that was good.
yeah.
What else do you have?
He saves us from our feelings.
Okay. There's no wrong answer. But here's the list that I came up with. He saves us from the world. He saves us from the devil. He saves us from death. He saves us from wasting our lives.
Amen.
And he saves us from ourselves, just like Sister Christine said.
We're not you, brother.
Dum 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 dum. Dum dum dum. To the utmost, Jesus saves. To the utmost, Jesus saves. He will pick you up and turn you around. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Jesus saves. Ooh, ooh. Jesus saves.
Amen.
Is
Amen.
it funny?
Why we're here.
So the name of it.
I found a verse to go with that. This is part of why we're here, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God.
Men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and heed my words. For these are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the third hour of the day. This is what was proclaimed by the prophet Joel. I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved.
Now, the other part of why we're here has to do with that there's a great darkness coming upon the earth,
Is it on me?
and men love darkness rather than the light. And to those, the Lord's appearing, the brightness of his coming will come just like a thief breaking into your house at night. But you, brethren, that's us, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. When people during the Great Tribulation are running around scared and traumatized and frightened and insecure, what is it we're going to be able to say to them? It starts with, this is just the. What's the rest of it?
Oh, this is just the
You'll have the exact verse that applies to the situation, just like Peter did when he explained
this-
Pentecost.
Is this the? I totally missed what you just said. What is
I
it?
know what it is. I know.
This is what we'll be able to say to those who don't know what's going on.
Is
They
this in
want-
a scripture?
No, this is just a
Well, we
slogan.
would-
Is this just the
what we
tip of
will-
the iceberg?
This is just how the Bible
Said it would be.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, yeah.
This is just the way the Bible said it would be. You don't have to say this word for word. You're going to be explaining the times. You're going to be explaining the situation to calm their fears and let them know that the Bible already talked about it.
Tip of the iceberg.
Sorry.
That the Bible already talked about it 2,000 or 2,500 years ago. So hopefully they'll learn how to trust the Bible because the prophecy is being fulfilled right in front of them. And then they'll be able to trust the one who wrote the Bible. When the Bible wrote the future,
the coming rapture, the day of the Lord, the tribulation, the coming rise of the Antichrist. And one of the good questions we really should ask is, well, how do we know that those things are really going to happen in the future? I mean, anybody can prophesy and say what's going to happen in the future, but the only way that we can really know for sure that future prophecies are going to happen and be literally fulfilled is if we have prophecies that have already taken place and been fulfilled. And there are about 1,000 prophecies in the Bible, and about 500 of those have been fulfilled and about 500 are yet to be fulfilled. And the Bible has 500 prophecies fulfilled with 100% accuracy 100% of the time. Now that's quite a track record. So we can know that these future prophecies, these end time prophecies will be literally fulfilled just as the Bible says.
This is our final 7-year timeline. Again, it begins with the Mideast peace agreement, halfway through the abomination of desolation at the Third Temple in Jerusalem. Lets us know who the Antichrist really is. And the timeline ends with the Battle of Armageddon and the Second Coming. So major prophecies we'll be looking at includes the Mideast peace agreement, World War III, Ark of the Beast, one world government, one world religion. We'll begin with the Mideast peace agreement. Someone want to read this verse for us from Daniel 9?
Daniel 9:27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate.
In order to understand this verse, it would be good to start out by figuring out who the He is and what the covenant is. And then we need to know what confirming the covenant means.
The He in Daniel 9:27 is the Antichrist. The second question is, what is the covenant? Well, Genesis 15:18 explains, it says, in the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So all the way back in the first book of the Bible, God made a covenant with Abraham that the Holy Land would be given to his descendants for a homeland. This is referred to as the Abrahamic covenant. Number 3, what is the confirmation of the covenant? Well, if the covenant is God's promise to Abraham and his descendants who would live in the promised land, then what's the confirmation of the covenant? Well, we've already proven above that the Antichrist is the He of Daniel 9:27. So it follows that he is the one who will confirm the covenant. In other words, the Antichrist will confirm Israel's right to a homeland in the promised land.
Anybody know who this is?
No, I don't.
Would you suspect him to be a good guy or a bad guy?
Looks like
Looks like a medical guy.
Neutral.
So we'll say.
He looks like
a
Palestinian or something. He's from
Iranian
Palestine?
commander or something.
He is a Palestinian. This is the face of Hamas. His name is Yahya. I suppose that's how you pronounce his first name, but the second name is really interesting. Sinwar. Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
Sinwar. And here are the demands. Hamas has 5 key demands in the hostage release negotiations. These key demands reveal its broader aspirations for consolidating power and influence. Here are the demands. This is what Hamas wants in order to release hostages. Irreversible cessation of hostilities, no disarmament for Hamas, return of displaced Gazans, and accepting tunnel reality, whatever that means. In other words, we're not going to blow up the tunnels, I suppose. I'm guessing. I'm not quite sure. Consolidating power in the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority.
The head of the Hamas Diaspora Office, as it's called, telling Sky News Monday that hostages would be released if Israel agreed to release 6,000 Palestinians detained in Israeli jails. Then, early this morning, a complete contradiction from the militant group's official spokesman who said there would be no plans to release hostages at all because, quote, it is a war. Hours later came another contradictory claim, this one made to NBC News, in which a top Hamas official claimed it would release all civilian hostages immediately if, quote, the bombing stops in Gaza. So what is it? At this point, what is Hamas's strategy? What is its goal, if it has one? Joining me to talk that through by phone is Michael Pregent, Senior Fellow and Middle East Analyst at the Hudson Institute. Michael, what are we learning at this point, given all of that in its totality, about Hamas's strategy concerning hostages?
Yeah, so when it comes to hostages, and thank you for having me, Hamas is using the leverage of hostages. Now, what's happened in the past is Hamas has returned the bodies of hostages to Israel. In this case, we have 40 countries that have hostages based on the raid that took place on October 7th. These 40 countries are working desperately to get their people out. And we cannot have Qatar broker those hostage negotiations, because we've seen what the price of using Qatar to broker hostage negotiations. When it comes to the 5 Americans that were released from Iran, we gave Iran through Qatar, and I know it's on hold now, but I could put quotes around hold. We gave them $6 billion. So the hostage negotiations right now, Qatar cannot be a part of it. And based on where these hostages are, I think there are a lot of us that just don't want to say it, and we don't think they're going to be able to come out alive.
Oh, dear. I mean, that's the fear. Yeah. Well, Michael, I mean, I guess at a basic level, what does Hamas get out of holding hostages, performing surgeries on these people, creating videos with these people, if there is no plan to barter? Usually you want to get something in return and, and move people.
So what Hamas will do is they'll get the Americans, because they, unfortunately, are on a higher return rate for ransom payment. They'll get some of the European countries. They'll get the hostages to Lebanon, and from Lebanon, maybe they'll go to Iran, and from there, these European countries will actually have to pay ransoms to get their people out.
Victims sue UNWRA. Israeli hostage families sue UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. That's the arm of the United Nations that provides aid to the starving and just relocated Palestinians in Gaza, for funding Hamas.
More than 100 victims of the October 7th attack are suing the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. They claim UNRWA knew its facilities and funds were being used to help Hamas in Gaza.
The suit comes as the families of 3 hostages are releasing new footage of what happened to their loved ones on that horrific day. CBN's Julie Stahl has that story.
More than 100 victims of the October 7th Hamas attack are suing UNRWA. They accuse the UN aid agency for Palestinians of aiding and abetting the terror, $1 billion in damages.
We suddenly became aware that UNRWA had a huge role in what happened. But what we uncovered that was surprising is the scheme for funding Hamas's acquisition of smuggled weapons, explosives, and other things. So,
Attorney Gavi Marone filed the complaint in a New York court, saying UNRWA's own reports indicate they knew that Hamas stored explosives, assault rifles, rockets, and mortars in their schools.
Obviously, the end of the story is that they absolutely provided safe harbor for Hamas terrorists to use those schools, the safe harbor protecting the Israeli army trying to, discover them.
The suit comes as hostage families approved the release of new footage showing their loved ones being taken captive from the Nova Music Festival.
We and the other families felt that it's very important, any piece of evidence of what happened on October 7th, how these people were stolen from their lives, is critical for the world to see.
Preventing a wider war. Top Biden envoy Amos Hochstein meets with Netanyahu as conflict in the north heats up. Israel warns of possible all-out war after Hezbollah publishes video of military and civilian sites.
Fears of an expanding conflict in the Middle East after Israel's foreign minister warns Hezbollah it would be destroyed if all-out war breaks out. Israel Katz's comments online follow Hezbollah's release of a purported 9-minute drone video that shows sensitive military locations and civilian areas in Haifa and other Israeli cities. And while tensions percolate along the northern border with Lebanon, there's a brewing diplomatic rift between the Netanyahu government and the White House. We are connecting the dots on this for you with Ben Wiedemann, back with us this hour from Beirut. Paula Hancock's is in Jerusalem, and Lauren Fox is in Washington on Capitol Hill. Let me start with you, Ben. Just describe to us the importance of this purported video shot by drones, Hezbollah says, from Lebanon over Israeli cities, including Haifa, which of course serves as a crucial gateway to the rest of the world and maybe more importantly for Israel. How does Hezbollah manage to fly a drone in such strategic locations? And is this psychological warfare that we're looking at here?
Well, Becky, I think the Israelis are also trying to figure out how it is that Hezbollah was able to fly those drones over some very sensitive military positions, military industries, the port, where we see huge oil storage facilities. They got it all. Now, for one thing, what we've been seeing from almost the beginning of the back and forth skirmishes between Hezbollah and Israel is that Hezbollah has been targeting Israeli surveillance and observation equipment all along the border. The Israelis, in fact, brought in cranes to replace the destroyed surveillance equipment, and Hezbollah took those out as well. So clearly there are holes in their ability to see what enters Israeli airspace, but above and beyond that, clearly Hezbollah has the technical capabilities to collect this sort of sensitive information well inside Israeli territory. It's about 30 kilometers from the nearest point on the Lebanese-Israeli border to Haifa. Was it a propaganda video? Well, actually, if you looked at the text in the video, there wasn't anything about attacks. It was just very sort of factual, explaining what this location is, what it served, what you're seeing. And it really is a message to the Israelis that, you know, don't mess with us. We not only have the ability to collect intelligence deep inside your territory on very sensitive sites, but along with that probably comes other capabilities that we've seen slowly unveiled in the last few weeks. For instance, Hezbollah in the last few months has been able to shoot down 3 Hermes 900 Israeli drones, very sophisticated drones that can fly as high as 30,000 feet. They took those out with anti-aircraft missiles.
American Gaza pier struggles to deliver aid. American temporary pier system anchored to the shore in Gaza has only delivered aid for 17 of the last 40 days. What happens is the storms come up and anything above 4-foot tall waves, the pieces of the pier smash into each other and break up. So when those waves get big, when they have a season of high seas, the whole thing has to be disassembled and carried away so it doesn't get destroyed. Biden's been criticized that this has been ineffective in providing aid to the Palestinians, and that it's just a showpiece, just for show.
You can see the beach from this American pier off Gaza. Tonight, our first look at the structure which has allowed the U.S. military to deliver much-needed aid by sea.
It took about an hour to get from the Israeli port at Ashdod to here. This is J-LOCKS. It's a temporary U.S. military pier system meant to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. But even after about 6 weeks of operating, the U.S. military has seen it has some limitations.
Including weather. High seas and winds damaged the embattled pier last month, forcing the U.S. to drag it back to Israel for repairs.
The weather here today is calm, so aid is moving. But once these waves get to about 4 feet high, the pier has to be taken apart and moved, or it risks being damaged.
President Biden unveiled the pier with great fanfare during his State of the Union.
A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
It cost American taxpayers over $220 million, but has only delivered aid on 17 of the last 40 days.
It's been online 17 days of the last 6 weeks, mainly for weather. So when you look at that, do you still feel that this mission has been a success?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me point out why. One, as a commander, personal, my soldiers and sailors have stepped up. We know the weather got us. And when it did, they stepped up.
The day's deliveries were made, the U.S. military brought in nearly 14 million pounds of aid, often the main contributor to aid for Gaza on any given day. The beach area takes indirect fire nearly every day, according to defense officials. The pier has not been targeted, but aid agencies suspended distribution and haven't delivered that aid since June 9th.
This next image is a clue about what our next prophecy major prophecy we'll be discussing is. What's the next major prophecy we're going to talk about?
4 angels bound in River Euphrates.
Amen. On the final 7-year timeline, we're going to talk about World War III. World War III. Here's the prophecy from Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 15. Someone read that aloud for us?
And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice saying to the 6th angel, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, for to slay the 3rd part of men.
Now, what are the 4 countries that house the Euphrates River?
Syria, Turkey, Iran.
Amen. So you look for escalation of hostilities in any of these 4 countries, or maybe all 4 at the same time. And it could very well be a fulfillment of the Euphrates River War prophecy, or World War III.
And I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, one saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released, so that they would kill a 3rd of mankind. So a voice from the altar in heaven, the altar of incense, tells the 6th angel, the one who blows the 6th trumpet, to release these angels. And as you see, they are bound and imprisoned at the Euphrates. This tells us instantly these aren't good angels. They have to be evil angels. God wouldn't bind and bound his good angels. And their mission is to kill 1/3 of mankind.
Is a nuclear conflict a possibility? Nearly $100 billion has been spent by the world's 9 nuclear-armed nations in a single year. Tensions between the Lebanon-based group Hezbollah and Israel have been mounting.
Nuclear weapons. Mankind's most destructive invention ever conceived and then mass-produced. Since the Cold War, competing superpowers have subscribed to a nuclear doctrine that stockpiling these weapons provides protection through each side being deterred from using them to avoid the risk of mutually assured destruction. A new report from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, shows that there are 9 nuclear-armed states in the world. Combined, they spent more than $90 billion on their nuclear arsenals last year. The US is by far the frontrunner, spending more than $50 billion. It's followed by China at nearly $12 billion and Russia with a little over $8 billion. The United Nations Secretary General says the world has been extraordinarily lucky so far not to have seen global geopolitical tensions erupt into catastrophe.
Today, humanity is just one misunderstanding, one miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation.
The world's nuclear-armed nations last year spent a staggering $2,898 per second, or $250 million a day, on both maintaining their existing arsenals and expanding them. ICANN argues this money can and must be better spent. The UN's World Food Programme says global hunger can be eradicated if these countries spend $40 billion per year on assistance until 2030. 1 year of nuclear weapons funding could also help cover nearly 30% of what's needed to mitigate and adapt to climate change. With conflicts intensifying, the world appears increasingly unstable, upping the risk of tactical or so-called battlefield nuclear weapons being used. A report by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says Russia has 5,500 warheads.
If we look at Putin's activities, literally since the first day of the invasion of Ukraine, he has been making nuclear threats. He has been talking about the importance of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
It's nearly 7 years since 122 nations of the world voted in favor of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Celebrations at the time. But the world is no closer to eliminating nuclear weapons. And the figures show the opposite is happening. And the nuclear arms business is booming.
War with Hezbollah fast approaching. Why and is Israel-Hezbollah war looks increasingly likely.
In the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, Hezbollah has launched rockets into Israel in what was effectively an act of solidarity with Hamas, although Hezbollah has insisted that it didn't have any forewarning about Hamas's plans. Since then, on a near-daily basis, Hezbollah and the Israeli military have been exchanging rocket, drone, and missile fire across the Israel-Lebanon border. Now, so far, this back and forth hasn't spilled into an all-out war, but that's not to say that it's been inconsequential. Far from it. At least 27 Israelis, 8 civilians and 19 soldiers have been killed by Hezbollah strikes, and more than 60,000 Israeli civilians have been displaced from northern Israel because of the conflict. At the same time, Israeli strikes in Lebanon have killed at least 87 civilians and almost 300 Hezbollah fighters, and more than 94,000 people in southern Lebanon have had to flee their homes. Attacks haven't just been limited to the immediate border area either. Hezbollah, for example, has expanded its strikes to include the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, and has also attacked targets as far south as Acre and Tiberias. Israel, meanwhile, has struck far deeper into Lebanon, hitting targets in Lebanon's east and north, and also carrying out a strike on a southern suburb of Beirut. And this conflict has been escalating further in recent weeks. An Israeli strike earlier this month killed the most senior Hezbollah commander so far, and in response, Hezbollah fired some 250 rockets at Israel in one day, its largest volley yet. Then, this week, Hezbollah published a near 10-minute video of drone surveillance footage of sites in northern Israel, including of residential neighborhoods in the city of Haifa, as well as sensitive areas like military installations and the city's port and airport. This prompted the Israeli foreign minister to suggest that the Israeli government would soon make a decision on opening up a significant new front against Hezbollah, writing that in an all-out war, Hezbollah will be destroyed and Lebanon will be severely hit. Later on, the Israeli military said that operational plans for an offensive in Lebanon were approved and validated. Hezbollah's leader responded by warning that Hezbollah would attack Cyprus if it allowed Israel to use its ports and bases, which is a possibility if the IDF deem Haifa too vulnerable. This would effectively expand the war to directly include the EU, and Hezbollah is presumably hoping that this will encourage the EU to put pressure on Israel to de-escalate.
Hezbollah attacks could lead to regional war. The U.S. is trying to prevent an all-out war with a diplomatic solution.
The U.S. is warning Hezbollah that it can't stop Israel from going to war to stop the terror group's daily attacks on the north.
Hezbollah's provocations threaten to drag the Israeli and Lebanese people
into a war that they do not want.
Still, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is urging Israel's visiting defense minister to seek a diplomatic solution.
Another war between Israel and Hezbollah could easily become a regional war with terrible consequences for the Middle East.
Yoav Gallant says Israel is determined to establish security in the north and bring back some 80,000 citizens evacuated from their homes. He urged the U.S. to focus on heading off another threat, Iran getting nuclear weapons.
The greatest threat to the future of the world and the future of our region is Iran, and time is running out.
Hezbollah war inevitable. No place safe. Hezbollah threatens Israel ahead of an all-out war.
While the world's attention has been largely focused on Israel's battle to defeat Hamas in Gaza, a much larger war looms to the north. For over 8 months, the Iran-backed terrorist army Hezbollah has fired waves of rockets, missiles, and attack drones from Lebanon into northern Israel. And folks, we're approaching the point where Israel may have to act decisively against Hezbollah. A major reason is that tens of thousands of Israelis have been forced to evacuate their homes in the north with no idea when they can return home. Our TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto visited those beleaguered communities near the Lebanon border and has this report.
We're now standing in an area that was attacked by Hezbollah missiles and drones. You can see all the area here that is black was recently burnt as part of all the fires that Hezbollah caused using their missiles to attack Israel. People don't talk about it enough, but the northern part of Israel is at war for 8 months. In recent weeks, Hezbollah has upped its operations to a whole new level with cross-border attacks from Lebanon reaching way further into Israel, setting the Galilee and Golan Heights ablaze and causing huge damage to the northern region. With around 60,000 Israelis still evacuated from the region, Israel can no longer ignore its northern front or delay taking stronger action here in the north.
We are standing in Kibbutz Malkiah, in the Upper Galilee, near the Lebanoni border, maybe 200 meters. I'm here in the defense platoon of Malkiah. Before the 7th of October, there used to be here about 450 people. Now there is maybe 25 people here that don't want to go any other place. The reality is lots of bombing, fires. We need to deal with it alone.
There's no chance I will evacuate. Not only that I will not evacuate myself, I'm part of a great team. The only way we can make our living would be regarding to farming. Apples, cherries, apricots, you name it. So, of course, we're working right by the fence, and we are ready for any escalation, any development. It's not the Lebanese people. Most Lebanese people, if you ask them, they will whisper to you because they're scared of Hezbollah. They don't want any trouble with Hezbollah. It took over the south part of Lebanon, and I would say it took over all over Lebanon.
So what's the solution?
What's the solution? Be strong. Because if you're not strong, they will eat you alive. They eat one another.
Yeah.
One hand on a gun, but one hand free to shake their hands. Whoever wants to shake our hands.
Once again, looking at the final 7-year timeline, we're next going to consider famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. And here's the verse for it. Someone read that, please?
For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Matthew 24:7.
Disease X. Finland First Nation jabbing humans against bird flu. This came from Sister Jen. She sent it to me. Only I had to change the headline a little because it had a certain word in there that the YouTube algorithm doesn't like, and it
Oh.
spits it out and takes it down.
What
So-
word is that?
Well, the word I put in there is jabbing. So you can imagine what the word is that the algorithm doesn't like. Maybe Anthony Fauci will come out of retirement to tell everyone how to be safe from the latest government-produced health crisis. Might get taken down for that.
Hello, I'm AI anchor Sana, and you are watching Aaj Tak AI. Check out the latest information on AI health. Finland is set to begin offering preemptive bird flu vaccinations to workers exposed to animals as early as next week, making it the first country to do so. The country has secured vaccines for 10,000 people through a joint EU procurement effort, including up to 40 million doses for 15 nations from Australian manufacturer CSL Seqirus. Vaccinations will begin next week in some parts of Finland and will be administered to workers at fur and poultry farms, lab technicians handling bird flu samples, veterinarians working as animal control officers, and people working in sanctuaries for wild birds, livestock farms, and animal byproduct processing plants. If a human infection of avian influenza occurs, close contacts of the suspected or confirmed case will also be offered the vaccine. The Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, THL, stated that the vaccine will be available to those aged 18 and over who are at higher risk of contracting avian influenza due to their work or circumstances. The H5N1 strain of bird flu has led to the death or culling of hundreds of millions of poultry worldwide and has increasingly spread to mammals, including cows in the United States, and in some cases, to humans. The symptoms of bird flu are diarrhea, breathing difficulties, and swollen heads. Mild symptoms such as cough, headache, sore throat, and fever. The most severe symptoms are pneumonia, which requires hospitalization. The virus spreads through birds' saliva, mucus, and feces, posing risks to people and animals through unprotected contact. Finland has not reported human cases but is starting vaccinations due to risks from fur farms.
Did you notice that Finland has not reported any human cases?
They have?
Haven't.
Oh, they haven't.
Not a single human case
So then
of...
why are they pushing it there? Why do they start there?
Because the globalists know that jabs, I almost said the wrong word. Globalists know that jabs are good for everything. Whatever's ailing humanity, jab them. Sorry, this lady is not real.
That looked like a total real person before she started talking.
She's an AI-generated image. Somebody typed the text in, and the AI generated this whole image that you're seeing here. They animated it.
So she's not real? No. She looked real to begin with, didn't she?
So pretty soon they won't need human actors anymore. You watch. Pfizer knew it misled the public. A lot of the dissenting opinions that were suppressed and ridiculed at the time have proven to be correct.
Oh, yeah. We're all labeled.
Kansas Attorney General sues Pfizer over misrepresentations, even though it knew the jab, not the other word, even though it knew the jab was connected to serious adverse events.
Welcome to today's talk, Tuesday the 18th of June. Now I've got a very significant development from Kansas today, who are suing Pfizer. Basically, it seems under consumer protection and description for misrepresentation of the product as I read it. Now there's been various interpretations of this online, so I've gone back to the original source. Now this is the original document here. It's readily available. I'll put the link to it. And this is directly from the official source, the state of Kansas. And we see the full document there. Now, it is a very extensive document. Just give you an impression, it runs to many pages of really quite detailed information. And I think you'd have to say pretty concerning information. Now, to me, the information given here looks pretty convincing, I must say. And it'll certainly be interesting to see how this plays out and how it transpires. If this case in Kansas is successful, I think we can expect cases potentially in every state in the United States and potentially in other countries around the world. This has got huge significance. And I'm really hopeful this will give us more clarity. Clarity would be good. But let's get straight down to some of the detail now. So first off the heading here, and they're very upfront about this, Pfizer misled the public. So misled the public that it had a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. Do you feel misled by the early information we were given? I feel dramatically misled, dramatically let down by the information that we were given, which now it appears was selective, if this lawsuit is successful, of course. So Pfizer said its COVID vaccine was safe, even though it knew its COVID-19 vaccine was connected to serious adverse events. And the key word there, I think, is knew. Pfizer knew, according to this allegation, including myocarditis and pericarditis. Now, they've actually written this one down. Failed pregnancies. And I still don't know if I'm allowed to say this adverse reaction or not, but it's there. You can read it for yourself. That's what is being claimed. Pfizer concealed this critical safety information from the public. Concealed to me intimates that it's a deliberate act, but of course that is for the courts in Kansas to decide.
Like trusting McDonald's and Burger King or Popeyes that their food is nutritious and healthy for you.
You have to understand that the basic overreaching premise of all globalists is that vaccines are the answer to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Department of Defense report hides funding for Chinese labs.
Wow.
DOD Office OIG, what's OIG? I've got a brain freeze. I can't remember.
Office of Inspector General.
That's right, Office of Inspector General redacted key findings in a report on dangerous pathogen research conducted in Chinese labs that was being funded with U.S. taxpayer dollars. Rand Paul says the United States is still funding China despite overwhelming lab leak evidence. Those who suggest the pandemic began in a Wuhan lab have been criticized and mocked. Now, the U.S. Energy Department and FBI have conceded a lab leak is the most likely cause of the pandemic.
So what did you make of the hearing the other day where I had a colleague of mine from Reason Magazine there saying it was a really impressive debate, getting very deep dive on the scientific subject for the evidence for and against lab leak theory versus the natural origin theory?
Yeah, and if you listen closely, though, there's not a whole lot of evidence on the side of saying it came from animals. The only real evidence is that historically we know that this has taken place. We know that the coronavirus from 2002, 2003, from that epidemic, they found an animal reservoir, civet cats, and they found that the people who handled the cats had increased antibodies to this. They found a restaurant where this was being delivered. There was a lot of evidence. Also MERS, M-E-R-S, which was another coronavirus, they found an intermediate animal host in camels. So then we get fast forward to 2020, and as COVID-19 comes out, they look for an animal reservoir, and they've been looking for 3 years. They tested 90,000 some odd animals, but we found no animal positive for this, no animal reservoir. So that's the strongest evidence against this. The other evidence that Dr. Quay and Dr. Ebright presented was that when you look at the genetic structure of this virus, it's very unusual. It has what's called a furin cleavage site, which allows the virus to get into the cells. And this particular sequence of RNA doesn't exist in any other coronaviruses in this family. In fact, Dr. Quay has said that this family of viruses has been stable for about 1,000 years. You can apparently have a evolutionarily or a molecular clock to look at how long a family of viruses have been stable, and there hasn't been a virus in this family with the furin cleavage site. We also know that the Wuhan lab in question was inserting furin cleavage sites, where they have published papers that they were doing this. We know they had discussed in 2018 a large project in conjunction with the University of North Carolina to do exactly this. So there's a lot of circumstantial evidence on one side, and there's basically no evidence on the other side, other than that we know that animal viruses do occasionally infect humans. But the other argument against this coming from animals is that when animal viruses infect humans, they do so poorly initially, and they often will evolve over time to become more infective. So SARS-1 never really transmitted well from human to human, and so quarantine measurements and telling measures and telling people to stay home actually did help to control the spread of SARS-1, but didn't work very well with COVID-19 because COVID-19 showed up, as Dr. Alina Chan has mentioned, pre-adapted for transmission, already red hot and ready to go human to human, which looks more like what you'd see if a virus had been passed through animals in the lab to become sort of push natural selection towards human transmission. And that's what many of the scientists believe now. But I think the evidence was overwhelming in favor of the lab, and I didn't hear any evidence from the Democrat witnesses that really was very persuasive at all, saying it came from animals.
And then
given that scripture we were reading earlier, the 4 angels loosed in the great river Euphrates to slay the third part of men, I wonder how many people died as a result of COVID. If that's one of the ways, you know? And I think of the other way, that the other angel in 1 Kings or 2 Kings, when the armies came against Jehoshaphat and the angel went out and slayed like 80-something thousand.
85,000.
85,000 of the enemy in one night, one angel.
I don't know what the total figures are for COVID deaths globally.
There are people now that are complaining about having vaccine-related injuries, but they claim that they didn't take the vaccine. Same as part of the shedding issue.
Alex told me about shedding. I hadn't heard about it before the time Alex mentioned it. Top biologist gives brilliant speech on why lab leak theory is fact. Microbiologist Richard E. Bright perfectly explains why the COVID lab leak theory was in fact a reality, and its critics were incorrect.
Thank you for inviting me to discuss the origins of COVID-19. I'm Board of Governors Professor of Chemistry and Chemical Biology at Rutgers University and Laboratory Director at the Waxman Institute of Microbiology. In my statement, I will present my assessment of the origin of COVID and will summarize key lines of evidence that support my assessment. I assess that a large preponderance of evidence indicates SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, entered humans through a research incident. I base this assessment on information in publicly available documents, press reports, and scientific papers, on my research experience in microbial genomics, microbial genetics, DNA synthesis technology, and recombinant DNA technology, and on my knowledge of and experience with biosafety, biosecurity, and biorisk management for work with pathogens. 4 key facts support my assessment. First, COVID emerged in Wuhan, a city that is 800 miles from the closest bats harboring SARS-CoV-2-like viruses that could have served as progenitors of SARS-CoV-2, but that contains labs that prior to the outbreak were conducting the world's largest research program on bat SARS viruses, possessed the world's largest collection of bat SARS viruses, and possessed the virus most closely similar to SARS-CoV-2. The large distance between Wuhan and bats harboring SARS-CoV-2-like viruses points away from a natural origin of COVID, and Wuhan's status as the global epicenter of research on bat SARS viruses points toward a research origin of COVID. Second, in the 4 years preceding the outbreak, Wuhan labs performed research that placed them on a trajectory to obtain SARS viruses having high pandemic potential. And in 2018, 1 year before the outbreak, Wuhan Labs proposed research to obtain SARS viruses having even higher pandemic potential and features that match in detail the features of SARS-CoV-2. Wuhan Labs performed high-risk virus discovery and gain-of-function research on bat SARS viruses. In their virus discovery research, Wuhan researchers searched for new bat viruses in caves in southern China, brought samples to Wuhan, and sequenced, cultured, and characterized new viruses in Wuhan.
Looking again at our final 7-year timeline, we're going to consider the mark of the beast. It shows that toward the end of the final 3.5 years, this is during the Great Tribulation, toward the end of that Great Tribulation, by then the mark of the beast will have been fully implemented and adapted by the Antichrist and the false prophet to consolidate their power. The mark of the beast. If you'd like to read this verse for us from Revelation 13.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
Brainwashed to love the mark. Now, this is the first time I've kind of come across anybody else who's published or agreed with me, like I've said before, when I said, you're not going to be carried away kicking and screaming, forced to take the mark. That's how they do it in the movies. There's no evidence for that. There is more evidence that it'll be promoted as a beneficial thing. You'll have discounts and privileges associated with the mark, and of course you'll be able to buy and sell and eat. So this guy says America and other Western democracies are being brainwashed to not only accept the mark of the beast, but to love it.
Right now, America and other Western democracies, in fact the whole world, are being brainwashed to not only accept the mark of the beast, but even to love it, to want it, to stand in line to get it, gladly. Some of these folks who will love it are attending the same churches you are. Some, sadly, will be watching this very video. How can that be? Nearly every human in the Western democracies knows that 666 is the number of the beast. It's tied to eternity in hell. It's a bad thing. So Satan needs to alter our brains to allow or even welcome this number on our right hands or on our foreheads, something you'd never do naturally. So for Satan to achieve his goals, he has to get people to do what they would never logically do. We're being intentionally programmed to want the mark, using mind-altering techniques. If the ad agencies that seem like they can get you to buy anything, government policies, and even our music and social trends are all working toward this goal. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we're discussing this very important topic. How are people of the nations being set up to accept and love the mark? How can you recognize the brainwashing techniques that they're using on you, and who is this they who's doing all this? We're getting to all of that today. If you follow this channel for any length of time, you know what the mark of the beast is. We've done at least a dozen videos on this topic in the last 5 years, from what it is to what it isn't. However, this video is about what they're doing to influence you in advance of the mark being released. It's about subtle things, behind the scenes things that they're doing. So let's start right there. Who is this they that's doing this to our society? I know what your knee-jerk response is. You're thinking it's either one political party or the other. or that it's this billionaire or another. But the truth is, those are only people. In Ephesians 6:12, the Apostle Paul tells us, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." In other words, it's not humans, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts or fallen angels of wickedness in heavenly places. That our adversaries aren't human, but are fallen angels still reigning over us in heaven.
Looking at our final 7-year timeline again, the next major prophecy we'll discuss is one world government. Someone read this one aloud for us?
And it will be given unto him to make war with the saints and overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations.
Joe Biden's alarming debate moments. The reason I put the presidential election under world government is because the two of them, Biden and Trump, represent the two opposing sides in globalism versus nationalism. Trump hates globalism, Biden loves globalism. Trump is a nationalist, Biden is a globalist. So that's why I put him under this category. Joe Biden's alarming debate moments.
He poop again?
Maybe. Biden looked and sounded like an old man. His voice was so hoarse and raspy that his words were often hard to make out, like me. He lacked energy, and he repeatedly trailed off and lost his train of thought, like me.
We have multiple queued up showing Biden's utter confusion. He did not have the facts. He was confused over very basic facts, and it was repeated. Take a listen to this, Sat 3.
We have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Oh my God. That's it. That's it, Emily. I mean, I'm looking at my own notes as this unfolded, and here's how they read. So rehearsed, so old, phlegm, needs subtitles. What is he saying? So fast, rehearsed, can barely understand. He's done. That and so frail is my other. What was he saying? He beat Medicare, the trillions, the trillionaires, what he's done with COVID. He was all over the map.
And that was fairly early in the debate. So the vast majority of everybody who will consume the debate consumed that moment. So people saw that happen live. There's no spin in the world. There's no Joe Biden had a cold that can in any way whatsoever change people's opinion of what they saw happen in front of them on that. And, you said when you were in your opening, it sort of gave me chills. It's like a dark day in America. That is exactly how I feel. It's a very sad day to be an American because that is the president of the United States. The first lady is responsible for putting him in this position. There's no question about that in my mind. The people close to him are responsible for putting him in this position. And on top of that, we're seeing reactions roll in. The New York Times, during the debate, published a story saying that sources were telling one of their columnists, 3 Democratic sources telling their columnists that they were just stunned and shocked. We saw Casey Hunt say something similar over at MSNBC. And I'm curious, are they pretending to be surprised? Because people close to Joe Biden who have spent time with Joe Biden have got to have known. I mean, we saw him do a press conference not that long ago where he was telling everybody, you know, Robert Hur was wrong, and he was losing track of his sentences there. But here we are, fast forward to the debate. In addition to that Medicare answer, his answer on abortion became an answer on immigration. It was impossible to follow. He had no train of thought to follow. It was a disaster. I've really never seen anything like it.
That was a critical moment. It was terrible. It was another moment where we were all grabbing each other in my house. Like, what just happened? The question was about abortion, and he brought Laken Riley into it without naming her, this nursing student in Georgia who was murdered by an illegal. Here is the moment sought for.
I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't. Follow your heart. But you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things.
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal: there's a lot of young women are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters. It's just ridiculous.
Oh my God. Guys.
Bizarre. I mean, the only word for it is bizarre, right? I mean, what is, sometimes he's mumbly and confused, but kind of know what he's getting at.
Depressing.
Yes, sad's a good word. But this is hard, beyond comprehension.
Unrecoverable. He cannot go on. That's it. Those were the moments. I don't care. He did improve slightly toward the ends of the 90 minutes. It's irrelevant. Remember the time we saw him confuse two critical pieces of his legislation? I don't remember the two that he got confused, but he was in the midst of trying to make a point about one, and he meandered over and started talking about the other. And we were all like, what did he just do? He juxtaposed the legislation and trying to make his point. It wasn't a one-off. He can't keep the facts straight in his own head about something as simple as abortion versus illegal immigration. He had his rehearsed lines, and like a robot, Emily, he got a glitch that wasn't fixable without the handlers.
And he spent the last week not being president of the United States, but in Camp David, at Camp David, doing debate prep. And, not being the president of the United States, he was obviously doing both, but it's highly unusual to take an entire week while you're president of the United States, go to Camp David and prep. What's even more unusual, obviously, is then to come out looking like there was no prep in the world that could have prepared you to answer a basic question. My word association with that clip is medical. This is medical. For all of the conversation about Donald Trump and the 25th Amendment during his presidency, I mean, that has to be seriously on the table as the American people figure out what is going on with the man who is making nuclear decisions. There are two hot wars right now, one in Ukraine, one in the Middle East. And this is the man with the power over our military. That is the commander in chief. It's beyond a presidential election. I think what everybody just saw, those clips are going to be so viral. Forget how many people actually even watched this live. I think the number was pretty high. But Biden's moments there, they will be viral. They will live in infamy. They will never, ever, ever escape him. His entire reputation will be tethered to this for the rest of his life.
50 ISIS-connected migrants on the loose in the United States. Wow. Representative Michael Waltz, Republican of Florida, discusses Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas' handling of the border.
First, we understand that an ISIS-related smuggling group brought in 400 people, ISIS-related, ties to ISIS. Then we hear that 150 of them have already been apprehended and sent back, but there's 50 on the loose that they're still looking for. And then they say, oh, it's okay, though, that they don't pose an imminent threat to the homeland. What?
Right. Yeah, and then you've got the Secretary of DHS just a week after 8 ISIS operatives that were actively plotting and planning across multiple U.S. cities that had come across our southern border were arrested, thank God. He plays cutesy and kind of shoulder shrugs and parses words. Well, they're not 400 ISIS terrorists. They're associated with ISIS. And, you know, this is no time to be, you know, to be spinning the American people. You need to reassure the American people and say there's still 50 out there. We don't know. All 50 could be ISIS terrorists, active plotting and planning, or none. But I assure you, America, we're going to round them up. We're going to shut down this border. We're going to start detaining these people, and we're going to protect you.
Yeah.
Instead, we just get this kind of flippant, smug brushing off. And it's why we impeach the guy. It's why we're going to defund the guy. And it's why we have to win in November.
This from MRC TV. ICE ordered, Immigration and Customs Enforcement ordered to teach illegals how to easily get asylum. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers to take extreme measures to instruct illegal aliens on how to obtain asylum. Looking at our final 7-year timeline map, next we're going to consider the LGBTQ agenda. Someone read this aloud for us, please.
The same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Chapter 17.
Pride Month starting to show its colors around the world. This year's festivities in the U.S. will unfold against a backdrop of dozens of new state laws targeting LGBTQ plus rights, particularly transgender young people.
Welcome to Bangkok Pride. Happy Pride together. 여기 결혼하고 싶은 사람이 이렇게 많은데 결혼 안 시켜주시고.
War College hosts queer colonel. Trans-identifying colonel leads Pentagon LGBTQ plus initiatives team. Did you know that the Pentagon had an LGBTQ plus initiatives team?
Yep.
No, you knew.
Part of the diversity and equity and inclusion.
21, if I understand correctly, you actually served through Donald Trump's transgender military ban, which itself was a reversal of the Obama administration's policy. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I've served now 19 years in the military and seen quite the roller coaster of policy changes from the first time service was opened in 2016 through the years where we had a ban on transgender service again, where we had basically taken a step to reinstitutionalize discrimination. And that was a definite challenge to serve through that time. But I'm so thankful for the people around me, the people I've had the honor to lead, and the people I've worked for, all having so much support for me and for other transgender troops.
Supremes take up gender-affirming care bans. Supreme Court will take up state bans on gender-affirming care for minors.
Today, the Supreme Court said it agreed to take up the issue of gender-affirming care. The case involves a Tennessee law that restricts drug and hormone therapy for transgender minors. The Biden administration wants to block the law and others like it. Arguments will take place in the fall term, which begins in October. National correspondent Jamal Andrus joins us live now in Dallas. So, Jamal, this is the first time the High Court will be taking a look at a case that's like this, that is impacting minors. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Chris. Well, look, the first thing I can tell you is that this is going to have extraordinarily wide-ranging implications. I want you to take a look at this map just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. 25 different states have already passed the law that either bans or restricts gender-affirming care for minors. This is something that has made its way across the country like wildfire, these particular bans. And so in many of those cases, in many of those states, at least a dozen of them currently have some sort of ongoing litigation on the books. You know, the Texas Supreme Court has already weighed in on this issue here in Texas. This case is stemming from a lawsuit in Tennessee. There's an ongoing lawsuit in Kentucky. All over the country, you have legal challenges to this practice, this law, that essentially could be settled and done with due to a decision by that Supreme Court. Also, just for context, 14 democratically led states have also passed legislation, but essentially pushed the opposite way, essentially enshrining in law, protecting this kind of gender-affirming care.
Where is cricket stickers fund abortion rights? Abortion rights activists are capitalizing on the backlash against South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem's dog-killing revelation in a new book. She's a rancher, she's a horse person, and out in the rural areas, it's not uncommon to have to put animals down sometimes. And she wrote about it in her book because it was an emotional time for her. It wasn't a positive thing. And so the abortion rights people are selling bumper stickers. The dog's name was Cricket. She took the dog out and shot it in a gravel pit. Oh, wow. And so the bumper stickers say, "Where's Cricket?" And they're selling these to fund their abortion rights campaign.
He's dead.
And one of Trump's potential picks for vice president, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, is on the defense after strong backlash about a story of the governor shooting her dog. Chief Washington correspondent John Carl has the story. And John, this is a weird one.
George, this is quite a story. It's a story that Noem recounts in a new book about a short-haired pointer, a wire-haired pointer hunter dog that she had on her farm, who she says was untrainable. She tried to take the dog out hunting with other dogs. While the dog had a great time running around, it scared all the birds away. It was a disaster. On the way back from that hunting trip, she writes that she stopped by to see some friends. The dog jumped out of the truck and started attacking her friends' chickens, killing several of them, even whipping around to try to bite Noem. Noem says she then took the dog out to a gravel pit, George, and shot the dog. She said that, quote, "I hated that dog." As you can imagine, this has caused quite a backlash. Noem, however, is sticking by this, defending herself, writing over the weekend, "I can understand why some people are upset about a 20-year-old story of Cricket, one of the working dogs on our ranch." She said that her book is filled with many honest stories of my life, good and bad days, challenges, painful decisions, and lessons learned.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you see, it used to be that society was mainly agrarian. People, even if their parents didn't own ranches or farms, they would stay on ranches and farms, help with the chores, you know. They knew what it was all about. So it's a very foreign concept to anybody to talk about putting down animals.
Well, they
For city
put 'em
people.
down when it's inconvenient and they're old and they're hurting, and that's when they decide. But
I thought that whole cricket thing was it's going to be tied to the homosexual push, because Cricket Wireless is actually doing that. We actually switched from them recently, as well as Tractor Supply.
I've got Cricket Wireless.
Yeah.
Why are they DEI?
Oh yeah, like
I didn't
big
know.
time.
Okay. Pope says too much. Where's AJ? This Italian word.
Frociagini.
Frociagini. Frociagini. In Vatican. Pope says there's too much Frociagini in Vatican. See, he's not a native Italian speaker. He's from Argentina. So he used this word, Frociagini, to talk about how there's too much of this gay stuff going on in the Vatican. At Rome's 2024 Pride Parade, marchers holding signs seeking to both protest and reclaim a word the Pope has reportedly used twice in the last month. So apparently, this native Spanish-speaking Pope used an Italian word that he doesn't know was so inflammatory, so derogatory.
According to Italian media, Pope Francis used an offensive gay slur during a closed-door meeting with bishops. Reports of the alleged incident first appeared on a political gossip website called Dagospia and was later picked up by all major news outlets in Italy. The report said that during the meeting, a bishop asked the Pope what to do when gay men asked to be admitted to Catholic seminaries. The Pope reportedly said that he's against it because while it is important to embrace everyone, it was likely that a gay man could risk leading a double life. He then allegedly used a highly derogatory term in Italian to say that there are already too many gay men in seminaries. In a statement, the Vatican said the Pope never intended to offend or express himself in homophobic terms, and he extends his apologies to those who were offended by the use of that term. Well, according to Italian media, several bishops defended the Pope by saying that he used the term jokingly and claimed that as an Argentinian who speaks Italian as a second language, he did not fully understand how offensive that word is.
Next on the final 7-year timeline, next major Bible prophecy for which the stage is being set, which is in the process of being fulfilled right now, is the one world religion. Somebody want to read that for us, please?
He had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Revelation 13:15.
A mother encourages her daughter to fully open her mouth to swallow a live fish holding the medicine she believes will help cure her child's asthma, as scores clamor about, gulping down their own fish and hoping for the best. Each summer, on a day deemed auspicious by astrological calculations, people suffering from asthma and other respiratory ailments flock to the southern Indian city of Hyderabad to swallow a small live fish with its mouth stuffed with a secret herbal treatment that only one family can craft. Legend has it that in 1845 a wandering saint presented a secret formula. Miracle herbs to Veerana Goud, a man living in the old city of Hyderabad, and instructed him to give it to asthma patients for free. Since then, Goud's descendants, known as the Bethany family, have preserved the tradition and kept the herbal formula under wraps, shared only among male descendants. My great-great-grandfather, Veerana Goud, passed this secret formula to his sons and they passed it on to their sons, and now we are the 5th generation to keep the tradition, said Kakarna Alkananda, who helps oversee the distribution, though she is not privy to the formula.
Violence outside Los Angeles synagogue widely condemned. Violent protests outside the Los Angeles synagogue sparked condemnation from President Biden and prompted a new debate over escalating behavior over the war in Gaza. Powerful revival. Thirst for Bible sweeps college campuses. They actually are hungry for God. It's been the most beautiful thing.
All right, so you have been on the forefront of so much of the revival going on campuses around the country. What has it been like to see that fire in students?
I mean, I've never had more fun in my entire life. It is so real. There's no hype. Like, they actually are hungry for God. It's been the most beautiful thing. It's through a ministry called Unite that Tanya Pruitt started, and Jonathan McLeod and I have just been going and preaching the word. And my friends that have come, they're like, gosh, this is really stripped down. It's really raw because it's planned in 4 weeks. Students are planning it. They're inviting us. And they are responding to the gospel, and they are showing up in droves. So it's been super encouraging that this generation wants God.
I am not who I once was, defined by all the things I've done. Afraid my shame would be exposed, afraid of really being known. But then you gave my heart a home. So I walked out of the darkness and into the light, from fear of shame into the hope of life. Mercy called my name and made a way to fly out of the darkness and into the light. Wondering if I could change, 'cause when you're hiding all alone, your heart can turn into a stone, and that's not the way I want to go. So I walk out of the darkness and into the light, from fear of shame into the hope of life. Mercy called my name and made a way to fly out of the darkness and into the light. There's no place I'd rather be. Your light is marvelous. Your light is marvelous.